is happening internally. Nobody has to know about it on the surface. That's human nature. We work things through internally, and then we start bringing it out to the outside. So let's say I've got this incredible love towards my family, but I never tell them about it. So I've got to shift something inside of me, and I've got to say, now how do I link to the person I want to show love to? And that's the sixth element. It's called yesod. Yesod means bonding, even though the direct translation of yesod is foundation. But the foundation for anything meaningful is my ability to bond with it. If I'm going to have a meaningful relationship with a person, then I have to have a bond with that person. So it's the switch inside of me that starts me looking away from myself towards you.
Bye-bye.
The seventh level is the level of communication. Communication is called, in Kabbalistic terms, we call this malchus, and there's a reason for that, because malchus means leadership. It comes from the word melech, which is a king. If you're going to be a leader, effective leadership relies heavily on communication. If I'm a communicator, if I'm a real leader, then what I need to do is not just get up and say my message. I need to read my audience. I need to know who they are, where they're holding, what terminology they're familiar with. I mean, can you imagine if I go and speak to a bunch of businessmen and all the metaphors that I use are about cookery? I'm not talking their language. I need to understand where the person's at, what background they've got, if I'm going to communicate effectively with them.
So we can see from here that actually what distinguishes us from the other forms of creation is actually our ability to speak and communicate. So teaching involves all the spheres, as any action does, because the spheres are actually the makeup of everything. And the listener also has their process of going through. How much do they hear? How much of themselves is in it? What's relevant to themselves? They go also through the process of the sphirot, but in obviously a very different way.
So it's the day before Shavuoth and I'm going to the mikveh. What is the mikveh? It's a spiritual bath that you go into before Shavuoth or before Shabbat. It's likened to a reawakening because you go into water, and just like when you're in the womb before you come into this world, you taught the whole Torah in water. There's a midrash that says you taught it while you're in that amniotic fluid. I now go into water, and the Rambam says it's about going into the bath of knowledge. I come out fresh, having done my midas, and ready to go into this wonderful festival. And hopefully from next year, the whole cycle will start again.
There was no point of being liberated from Egypt other than reaching Sinai and receiving the Torah.
There's actually no date for Shavuot written in the Torah. The Torah is absolutely exact. There's not a repeated word in the Torah. The Torah goes through every single detail of the world, and no word is wasted and no word is left out. And yet Shavuot, which is one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, doesn't have a date next to it. So you see in the Torah it says that there's Pesach, and then it says you'll count 7 weeks, and then you'll have Shavuot. And the reason for this perhaps is alluded to in the idea that at the end of Pesach is the time of our freedom, and that's that inspiration that we see. And then we have to start building ourselves up and self-refinement until we are at the point where we're ready to get the Torah.
So on the 50th day, when we celebrate Shavuot, on the one hand we're commemorating the day that we received the Torah, but we learn, Hasidus teaches us that actually Hashem is re-giving the Torah every year. And it's all accumulative. We've had 3,500 years of giving the Torah, of receiving the Torah. And each year something new is coming forth from Hashem. On Shavuot, Hashem re-gives the Torah. And because the Torah is Hashem's essence, this is not a static thing. Something new is coming down into our world every single year when the Torah is given, to each one personally and for the Torah in itself. There's a newness that's given that's going to change and enrich and empower the whole of creation for that year.
So this was basically a fundamental act of rejection of all the
Shavuot, when I was growing up, was almost a nothing festival to me. It didn't have much of significance, and I never used to. We sometimes went to shul on Shavuot. In fact, I remember one year, just before I became more observant, we actually were in Sun City, and we realized that that day was Shavuot. It wasn't something that, Shavuot isn't really a chag where the family gets together, and not just my family, families in Joburg today, and sit down and have a meal together. When I became older, when I was, say, 18, and I was getting out of school, and I'd started learning, so Shavuot is the time when we get the Torah, and it's the time when the significance of that night, it's called Tikkun Leil, is to stay up the whole night and learn the Torah. And when I started doing that, so then it started having a whole different dimension where I would look forward to doing that, and sometimes dread staying up the whole night from the exhaustion. But that then had more significance.
The primary focus is, I am now receiving the Torah again, which really means I might have learned Torah for years and years and years, but here's a fresh start, fresh perspectives, going back to old things that I already know before and seeing them in a new light. Being prepared to embark on such a journey, to actually learn more. You see, if I've done it properly, and I've broken my old self on Pesach, and I've upgraded over the course of the 7 weeks, now I'm standing there with a whole lot new insight. So Shavuot is the time to take that insight, to open a book, and to learn it, and to make sure that that information that I'm getting deeper and better than I have before. You go through 49 days of this. Can you just imagine? Counting and reflecting and maybe even keeping a personal journal, or however you do it. And at the end of that, you come to this 50th day, which is the festival of Shavuot. I think you get two very different reactions. I think you get some people who feel, wow, I've just climbed a mountain. I've just conquered a whole new area of life that I never believed that I could. I think the majority of people are not even immediately able to quantify the change that's happened. Because when change happens in an incremental, natural, meaningful way, you don't notice it. You don't notice how much a child grows unless you haven't seen that child for a few months. You don't necessarily realize how much you've aged until somebody comes from over and says, wow, you've really aged. Natural growth is something which happens subtly. I think the period of the Omer is a growth that happens subtly. And you actually have to stop at the end of it and go back and look at yourself at the beginning and try and see what you were like then compared to what you are now, to really appreciate what you've done.
Shem, Nakila v'nismechavo, Zehayom Hatzado Shem, Nakila v'nismechavo.